All right, we are recording.
All right, very nice. So we want to talk about Tchias HaMesim, Mashiach, world to come, whatever, and we're looking for clarity. If we're looking for clarity, I think we can stop right here, and we can all have a good night. Nobody knows for sure. However, what we do know is what the Talmud presents and what some of the Rishonim offer. There are disagreements in the Talmud, and there are disagreements amongst the Rishonim. But it is important for us to know what these opinions are, so at least we'll get a better understanding. We have 13 principles of faith, as codified by Maimonides, based on the tractate of Sanhedrin in the 11th chapter called Chelek. And these, I don't know what that means. The host has spotlighted your video for everyone. Okay, whatever it means. Okay, I'll just keep going. These principles are the fundamentals of Judaism. If somebody says, what's Judaism all about? Most people would say, well, I mean, we don't believe in this, and we don't believe in Yashka, we don't believe in Muhammad, we don't believe in that. Yeah, but what do you believe in? What do we believe in? So these 13 principles really are the fundamental foundation. There are those who have taken the 13 principles and they really have isolated them into 3 categories. Number 1, belief in a supreme being. And some of the principles help us to understand what that means. There is a supreme being, a creator, beyond anything that we can perceive. Number 2, there is an element in which the Supreme Being has communicated to us and given us his divine word. That is his Torah. Through prophets, prophecy, through Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of all the prophets, whose word cannot be contradicted by anybody else. So we have a divine communication from the Supreme Being, which is the Torah. And the third category is that there is responsibility and consequence for our existence here in this world. And therefore, we can be welcomed into a messianic era and we can derive the benefit, and there can be a resurrection of the dead. All of that is intertwined with this principle that there's a thing called schar ha'onesh, reward and punishment. Now we'll see in a moment what this concept of punishment means. Okay. The 12th principle, the number 12 of the 13, is that we believe that when God so wills it, there will be a messianic era. A Mashiach will come, he will be revealed. And during this messianic era, we are going to experience a different type of existence. It might not happen immediately, but it will happen quickly, as opposed to those who say it's happening over centuries or millennia or what. It will happen quickly. The 13th climactic principle is that we believe that there will be a resurrection of the dead. All right, so that is obviously, that is the, as I said, the climax. This concept of a resurrection of the dead obviously suggests that there is an immortal element to man. You cannot resurrect that which is completely gone. There must be some type of a life force that can rejoin the matter. If man is consisting of a spirit and matter, you have to have this life force that can rejoin the matter. The matter might be in the most microscopic form. After all, that is how man is brought into this world, through a microscopic cell that is fertilized, and all of a sudden it turns into a human being. So there is a soul. That moment of conception is the ensoulment. And that's when man is considered alive, even in the most minute form. There is a
You're muted. Somebody mute you. We can't hear anything.
Did I just unmute?
Yes.
I am now unmuted.
Okay.
Okay.
We missed about the last 30 seconds.
Oh, well, consider yourselves fortunate.
I knew you were going to say that.
All right. So basically what we're saying is that the concept of resurrection of the dead suggests that there has to be an eternal spiritual element, a life force, which cannot die. And it is returned into the most basic microscopic matter, which is how man is formed in the embryo, the embryonic stage. So this is what we see, that there is a soul. Very important and fundamental in Judaism. All right, so let us talk a little bit. We speak about resurrection of the dead every single day when we pray. We have 3 opening brachas to our Shmona Esrei. We stand in silent prayer with our feet together. We are talking to God. God is listening to us. And we say that God is the great, magnificent, omnipotent creator who swore that he would protect Avraham and his offspring. And then we mentioned in the second bracha that God is the Machayim Esamata, Rav Loheshia. You will resurrect the dead. You're the Machalkel Chayim Bechesed, Machayim Esamata. God resurrects the dead. We even conclude the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, Machaye Amesim. This is something which is so fundamental in Judaism that we daven and say it every single day, at least 3 times a day. If we're davening Musaf, we'll say it 4 times a day. On Yom Kippur with Ne'ilu, we said it 5 times a day. So here it is. To a Jew, a concept of a resurrection of the dead is nothing startling. It's basic. It's there. We say it. Where is the source for this? So let's, everybody has, Rabbi Nidickman said that he gave you this, forwarded to you, he emailed it to you. You know what I'm talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. So do you see where it says chapter 11? Let's declare chapter 11 over here, the introduction. Have you got that? Don't all respond at once. You've got it. Okay, very good. Anybody want to read it? How about Ken Miller? Ken, you want to unmute and maybe you want to read this?
Okay. In our editions of Talmud Bavli, this chapter is the 11th and final chapter of the tractate. However, in Talmud Yerushalmi and in most editions of Mishnayos, it is the 10th and next to last chapter. Since the preceding chapters of this tractate discuss capital offenses, the current chapter follows to indicate that those who commit such grievous sins have a share in the world to come, after repenting and receiving their deserved punishment. See Gemara above 47a-b. For all of Israel has a share of the world to come, except those who have forfeited their shares, as enumerated in the Mishnahs of this chapter.
Okay, so the first thing that we see is that every Jew has a share in the world to come, even those who committed grievous sins. All right, let's see what this chapter focuses on. Please continue.
This chapter focuses almost exclusively on Agadic material and deals extensively with the future era. Many different terms are found in the Talmud pertaining to the future era, or parts thereof. We find reference to Yomot HaMashiach.
You can do it just in English.
The days of the Messiah or the Messianic era. In the future to come, the world to come, the resurrection of the dead, the Garden of Eden or paradise and its counterpart, Gehenom or hell. Sometimes these terms are used in general, a loose sense. Sometimes they refer to very specific epochs in the future era. At times they overlap or even refer to identical things.
All right, let's go to the next paragraph, okay? So that's what this chapter 11 deals with. So it's not a secret. It's not like this is some esoteric thing. We have an entire chapter in the Talmud that is dealing one way or another. So let's continue with the paragraph, the Messianic era. Go ahead, please.
The Messianic era, there is universal agreement regarding the meaning of the Messiah and the Messianic era. A scion of Davidic dynasty will gather the Jewish exiles from the land of their dispersal and return them to Eretz Yisrael, where he will build the holy temple and rule over the Jews as their king. The world will thenceforth forever be at peace, show obeisance to the Jewish king, and seek his counsel, and be filled with the knowledge of God, like the waters that cover the sea. See at great length Rambam and Hillel Melachim, chapters 11-12, based on Deuteronomy 33-10, Isaiah 11-9, Zephaniah 3:9, and many other verses. In the commentary on Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Zephaniah, and I'm reading it over again, sorry.
That's okay. You can skip the parenthesis.
All right. There is a dispute in the Gemara whether the Messianic era will usher in a time of supernatural existence or whether the current natural order will prevail, abide in an especially blessed and idyllic fashion.
All right. This was a very important paragraph. This is really taken from chapter 37 in the book of Ezekiel, in which he speaks about the period in which the Messiah will be revealed. When people say to you that the Messiah has already come, so we can, how do you know? Why don't you believe the Messiah has already come? The answer is because chapter 37, the book of Ezekiel, in which he says that number one, the Messiah is going to have to be a descendant of King David. And to be a descendant of King David, to be part of the tribe of Judah, that has to be determined by the father. As we know in Judaism, tribal affiliation is determined by the father. Religion by the mother, tribe by the father. So if somebody tells you that the Messiah's father is God, well, what tribe does God belong to? So number one, he has to be from tribe of Judah, direct descendant of King David, number one. Number two, it says, what is Messiah going to do? What is he going to do? There will be the kibbutz goliaths. We daven Shmones Revidim Makabetz Nidchei Amo Yisrael, God, which we call that the ingathering of the exiles, Jews who are dispersed throughout the entire world. We are all going to be brought to the land of Israel. That hasn't happened. And when they say that so-and-so was Messiah, all the Jews at that time were living in Israel. So there was no one to gather in. That shows you how ridiculous that is. Number three, the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, the third and final temple, will be rebuilt under the tutelage of Mashiach. That has not happened. Number four, he will be recognized as the king, the leader, the decisor of all of Klal Yisrael without any differing opinions whatsoever. I don't think we have ever had a period without dissenting opinions. Number five, he will be recognized as the great leader and source of wisdom for all mankind. That has not happened. This is all from Ezekiel. And number six, which is not from Ezekiel, but from other prophets, it says that the world will be filled with the knowledge of God like the waters cover the sea. What does that mean? It means that everybody's going to be talking about God. everybody, everything, the whole world, that's going to be the number one topic. That's going to be the most interesting thing. That's going to be what we wake up talking about, what we go to sleep talking about. It's going to be our source. It's so fascinating. And there will be knowledge that will be revealed to man, just as it was predicted in the Zohar that I think in the 19th century, there would be what we call the great industrial revolution. So this paragraph presents to us the description, so to say, the job description of Mashiach and how we know that he has not yet come. Let's talk about the resurrection of the dead. Eddie, you want to read the next paragraph? Resurrection of the dead. You have to unmute.
Okay. There is also universal agreement that the deserving soul is eternal and that a person's deeds in this world are rewarded or punished primarily in the afterlife that follows death. When a person dies, his eternal soul enters the world of souls, Gan Eden for reward and Gehenna for punishment and purification. There is also universal agreement that at some point afterward, God will literally resurrect the dead, reuniting here on this earth the body and soul that were separated through death.
Now, I want to point out something. Gehenna. Some say Gehenna is hell. Hell is usually understood to be something with fires and this and that or whatever. That's not what Gehenna is. Notice Gehenna is the area of punishment and purification. Emphasis on purification. The Talmud in the Tractate Shabbos says that when the person dies, the soul is like a garment that was entrusted to us. And when we have to return it and it's soiled, we have to send it to the cleaners. That's what this purification is all about. It is a cleansing of the stains upon the soul. Some souls are stained a little bit, some souls are stained greatly. That is what the function of Gehenna is. So when we talk of punishment, it's not an element of retribution, it's not an element of anger and you're terrible and rejection. On the contrary, it's the vaccine to remove the stains from upon the soul. Look at it like we're going to the cleaners. Okay, please continue.
Well, can I ask one question?
Sure.
The way this is worded, it seems like Gehenna and Gan Eden take place simultaneously.
Yes.
Is that the way it works, or do you go through Gehenna first and then Gan Eden?
Well, yes, a person would go through Gehenna first in order to earn their Gan Eden. That's correct.
Okay.
And some might have Gan Eden immediately. Some might go through the cleaning process very quickly. Others, it might take a little bit longer. Gan Eden exists and Gehenna exists simultaneously, two separate worlds, so to say.
Rabbi,
Go ahead,
before
Ronnie.
you go on in, do we have any knowledge of what type of process this purification process is?
Yes, let's go through what I printed out here for everybody. I think it's going to answer most of your questions. Then after we get all of this information, you can all yell at me and scream at me and hit me because everybody else is doing it. Go ahead.
The duration of bodily life after resurrection, however, is the subject of dispute among the Rishonim. Ramah, Ramban, and many other Rishonim insist that the resurrection state is eternal. Once resurrected, the righteous will live on eternally with body and soul united and delight forever in the splendor of the divine presence.
All right, very important. The Ramban, Nachmanides, he maintains that the ultimate paradise, Garden of Eden, is when the human body and soul are reunited and resurrected. And we live in a state of spirit and matter together as one in a purified state, serving God, enjoying the splendor of his divine presence. Okay? So that means after we're resurrected, we will no longer need to experience death again. However, according to the Rambam, Maimonides, go ahead.
According to Rambam and those who follow his view, however, the eternal world is not the world of resurrection, but the world of souls. For according to the Rambam, the state of resurrection is not permanent. Rather, the resurrected will live the unusually long, happy lives of the idyllic messianic era that culminates life on earth, eating, drinking, and procreating, just like people born initially in that epoch, however it's pronounced. Eventually, however, body and soul will again be separated, with the souls returning to the eternal world of souls to delight in the divine presence forever.
Maimonides is of the opinion that the eternal basking in the splendor of God's divine presence cannot be achieved as long as there is any material element. Even a material body that has been purified is nevertheless matter, and only the spiritual can join as one with the spirit. So the Rambam maintains that a person will die, there will be a world to come, there might be a Gehenna preparing them, purifying them, they will be resurrected, live a very long time, could be thousands of years, and then we'll go to sleep. No pain, no suffering, no illness. We'll go to sleep and the soul will leave as it leaves every night when we sleep, but it doesn't leave completely or else we're in trouble. It leaves every night. That's why in the morning we say, Moidani lefanecha. I give gratitude to you, God. You have returned my soul to me, because the soul has been taken qualitatively. So when the person after this long resurrection will go to sleep, the soul will be removed, and then and only then will it be able to experience the world of souls. So this is the disagreement, the Rambam and the Ramban. Now I wrote something down here to mention to you. Let's see, Shabbos morning, we say, Ein ke'erkecha. What do we say? Ein ke'erkecha on Shabbos. There's no one like you, God, in this world. There's no one like you in the world to come. What else do we say? What else is it mentioned there? I thought I wrote it down. We say Mashiach, and then by mentioning the Tchias HaMesim. The Ein Ke'erkecha that we say seems to reflect the opinion of Nachmanides, the Ramban, that the final step is there's this world, world to come, Messianic era, and then resurrection of the dead. And after the resurrection of the dead, there's nothing. Now, notice we have this world and the world to come, then the Messianic era. That means that those who have died are experiencing the world to come, while we who are alive are still in this world, simultaneous worlds. Okay. What else did I print up over here?
I just make one point over here?
Sure.
We have spent a long time learning about how in the Ramban's view, really it's the Orach Chaim, but the Ramban seems to be going with this as well, that Adam, when he was first created prior to the sin, was capable of traveling back and forth between the worlds.
Bias v'aliyah. He was able to exist in this world and in the upper world, the world of the angels, and in the world to come, correct, because his body was so pure and holy, correct.
Right. So the question is, would the Rambam agree that that was possible, or do we see from here that the Rambam would hold that Adam, when he was created, even then was not capable of connecting in the way that
this
Ramban
is no contradiction to Maimonides. Maimonides would also agree that man, when he was first created, had that capability. However, man has to be challenged, and after man's challenge, that's why God created us. We should be challenged and we should earn, and after we earn, then we can ascend to a higher level, a level which can only be experienced by a soul which is removed from its physical container. So it's not a conflict to the Rambam. Okay? Rambam can deal with that too. All right, if we go to the next section, the next handout that I gave everybody, Here is where it discusses in places which I put in parentheses, how do we know, where do we see in the Torah? Where does we see? Somebody says a resurrection of the dead. Okay, you say it in your prayers. It's something fundamental in Judaism. Where do you see such a thing? So if you notice, it says, so they bring various verses. You see on the upper left-hand side, where it says, Rabbi Yochanan demonstrates how a Pentateuchal passage alludes to the resurrection of the dead. You see that? I don't want to read the whole thing, but he quotes a verse in which it states, you shall give from it meaning from the land of Israel, truma, a tithe, to Aaron the Kohen. Now, did Aaron ever enter the land of Israel? No. He was born in Egypt and he died in the desert. He never got into Israel. If he never got into Israel, then how could we give Aaron the Israel type of Truma? And that's what it says. Is Aaron alive forever? He never entered the land of Israel that they should give him Truma. Rather, this teaches that Aaron is destined to live again in bodily form, and the people will give him Truma. This indicates clearly in the Torah that there will be a resurrection of the dead. Okay? Let's skip a page. Where do I want to go? I want to skip a couple of pages because I don't want to run out of time over here.
I think the next one is 90B2.
Let's go to 90B5.
Okay.
90B5. Got it? All right. You see the paragraph on the right-hand side, the third exchange. Queen Cleopatra asked Rabbi Meir. She said, I know that the dead will live again. As it is written, they shall blossom forth from the city like the grass of the earth. That's a verse from Psalms. They, meaning the dead, will sprout forth like grass. But what I want to know is whether, when they arise from the dead, do they rise naked or do they rise in their clothes? That's what Cleopatra was concerned about. He said to her, the answer can be inferred through a fortiori, analysis of a wheat kernel. Fortiori is a comparison of two things. If a wheat grain which was buried in the ground naked emerges from the ground fully grown and wearing several garments, it has a husk, it's got this, it's got that all around it, then how much more so will the righteous who are buried in their clothes emerge fully clothed at the resurrection? Indeed, when a person is resurrected, will be resurrected in his clothing. Might be the shrouds. He'll be resurrected in the clothing. Now, you might think that this is just a very simple response. And she could say, listen, what are you telling me about a wheat kernel, about seeds? I'm talking about a dead human being. I'm not talking about a seed. Seeds grow in Germany. This is very profound because there are other places in the Talmud in which we see a similar concept, in which there was a conversation in which we were asked, you Jews believe in resurrection of the dead. I mean, when something is gone, it's gone. How do you resurrect that which is dead? And they said, on the contrary, it happens all the time when you plant a seed. What does it mean when you plant a seed? When we plant a seed, we're burying it, and it decomposes. And yet somehow, miraculously, it seems to draw life from the moisture, from the earth, from whatever the source might be. And that which was dead and that which is buried and decomposed, all of a sudden it begins to sprout and blossom. And that is a clear indication of the dead shall rise. That which is buried and decomposes shall rise. And that's why Rameya here is not just pulling something out of a hat, but rather, as a matter of fact, the mitzvah of a funeral is the burial. We've learned that in our Monday night class. The burial, that is the biblical mitzvah. Why is that so important? Because that's what the soul of the deceased needs. The soul doesn't begin to adjust until after it has its fears allayed. And that is how it knows that its body is going to be buried. Why is that important? Because it is being planted in the earth to blossom and sprout forth with life at the resurrection of the dead. So this is an exact response that he is presenting. Let's continue.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Rabbi?
I want to, we don't believe in burning up the body like a lot of these people do.
Correct.
So when you think about this, it's completely backwards. And can you elaborate on that? What's going to happen with these people who have decided that?
Well, I wish I could. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible injustice that they're doing to the soul. The soul needs its body to be interred in the earth. That is the mitzvah. And as we've learned Monday nights, that once you finish the burial, that's really when the shivas start, because we finished our responsibility and our duty to the soul. That's what the soul needs. Now, what happens to those who weren't buried? What happens to those who were cremated and burned in the ovens of Auschwitz and other places? So God will take care of this. I don't have a clear answer on this, but I mean, does it mean that their soul is lost or whatever? Perhaps not. Perhaps the soul will be reincarnated. That's a discussion for another time, but we absolutely believe in reincarnation also. So it might get another body and to work with. Okay?
Rabbi?
Yes.
So when the Messianic age begins, what happens to all the people that are still alive?
Oh, so what's going to happen initially is when Mashiach is revealed, there's going to be a shofar blowing heard throughout the entire globe, and mankind is going to be stirred. And despite the fact that we're going to be spiritually aroused, there will be those who will rise up against Mashiach. Not immediately, but Mashiach will come. The great sages of Israel will question him. And when they see that indeed that this person is worthy and is righteous and has the ability, and he then begins with his personality and knowledge to attract Jews from all over the world. Jews who have been estranged to their Judaism are going to feel a fire burning within them. And when Jews start to come back to Israel, and when everybody all of a sudden, the Knesset and everyone realizes that we're dealing with somebody very special to whom we must submit ourselves. And even nations in the world, the United Nations, will also recognize this. After he establishes his government, there will be a war. There will be those who refuse to accept the Mashiach, the true Mashiach, and they refuse to accept the will of God. And they will come and there will be a great war, and that is the war of Gog and Magog, that the world they called Armageddon, and they will be utterly and totally and thoroughly defeated. And matter of fact, I think it says somewhere, I wish I knew where it says, that the bones of our enemies will fill the valley of Jehoshaphat, that you'll be able to walk from mountain to mountain, that you won't even notice any valley. And then we'll be able to usher in the full Messianic era, in which the third temple will be built. Now, what's going to happen? Let's go a little further to see what's going to happen. Let's see. I want to skip a little bit because I want to get to that point. Let's see. 92b1. Let's go to 92b1, everybody. We got it? On the left, the upper left-hand side, the Gemara asks, how can this Tana say that the resurrected righteous will not return to dust? There's a difference of opinion here. One says that once they're resurrected, they won't experience any death. Let us learn otherwise from the precedent of the dead whom Ezekiel resurrected. In Ezekiel, I think, where is it, chapter 38 or 36? I don't remember where, or maybe it tells us, 5. What does it say? The 37. Okay, the dry bones. Okay, the dry bones. God told them to go to the valley, and in this valley, it was filled with dried out, lifeless bones. And there God said to Ezekiel, behold, and the bones, it says, all of a sudden, they started to move. They came together, they interlocked, it formed a skeleton. Upon the skeleton, all of a sudden it seemed before the flesh, there were like cells, and there was tissue, and there was muscle and whatever, and then there was it, and there was life. They were resurrected. Okay? So it says, let us learn otherwise from the precedent of the dead whom Ezekiel resurrected. So the Gemara says, this Tana holds, as does the one who says that in truth, the account of the resurrection in the book of Ezekiel was a parable. It didn't actually happen, it was a vision. For it was taught in the Bireishis, Rabbi Slatus says, the dead that Ezekiel resurrected stood on their feet, uttered song, and then died. What song did they utter? Hashem puts to death with justice and brings to life with mercy. Rabbi Yeshua says they uttered the following song. Hashem puts to death and brings to life. He brings down to the grave and raises up. Rabbi Yehuda says, it is true, it was a parable. Rabbi Nechemia said to Rabbi Yehuda, what are you saying? It's unclear. If it's true, then it's not a parable. And if it's a parable, what do you say it's true? Say rather, in truth, it was a parable. All right, now listen to this. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Slatus, said, the dead that Ezekiel resurrected went up to Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't a vision. It wasn't a parable. It happened. They married and fathered sons and daughters. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira rose to his feet and declared, I am one of their descendants. And these are the tefillin that my father's father left me from them. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said, it was not a vision. They were brought to life. They went to Israel. They married. They had children. I'm a descendant. Here's their tefillin. Can you imagine that? Incredible. Now, what is going to happen once we have this messianic era? What will happen is, let's see. First of all, at the resurrection, it states that the people will be resurrected with their infirmities. Just as they died, that's how they're going to be resurrected. What do we say? We say this in our davening. God is going to, with great compassion and mercy, resurrect the dead. Okay? After he resurrects the dead, it says, what does it say? The fallen he shall lift up. That means after we're resurrected, those who are too sick to get out of bed and move are still going to be sick. And God's going to lift them up. And what about those? So, okay, I'm able to stand now. I couldn't stand. A person couldn't stand when he's on his deathbed. Now he can stand. What about my illness? God's going to cure it. What about my body? My body was racked in pain. God is going to let us stand erect. He's going to let us move our limbs. We're going to be pain-free. We're going to be brought back to our health. But we're not going to rise from the dead completely healthy. On the contrary, to recognize the miraculous event that is taking place that all mankind is going to witness. Can you imagine that? Now, where are we going to see it? Is the resurrection going to take place in Savannah? No. New York? No. France? No. Where is it going to happen? It's going to happen in the land of Israel. God in chapter 37, verse 12 in Ezekiel says, behold, I will open your graves and bring you up, bring you to the land of Israel. Rabbi Eliezer said The Holy One, blessed is he, will make for the righteous who are buried in the diaspora tunnels through the ground, through which they will roll till they reach Eretz Israel. Now, I don't know what that means. What are we going to roll through the ocean? It's a lot of rolling we're going to be doing over there. But it means that God is going to bring us through the ground somehow until we get to the land of Israel. And there in Israel we shall be resurrected. As the verse says, I shall put in you my spirit and you shall live. This is what shall take place. So the resurrection will be in the land of Israel. Maimonides, the Rambam, in his masterpiece, Yad HaChazaka, in which he outlines all of Jewish law, in the book of Kings, that's where he talks about, I think in chapter 11, chapter 12, he talks about when Mashiach comes and the resurrection. And the Rambam says that when we are resurrected, or I should say, when we have the Messianic era, life will be just as it is today, except there will not be illness, food will be plentiful, life will be comfortable and easy, similar to how it was initially intended in the Garden of Eden, in which man didn't have to work at all. All the food was there. We'll have to work, we'll go to work, but there won't be hatred, there won't be theft, there will be knowledge of God, and there will be an opportunity for us to perfect ourselves. This is the Rambam. Others say that during the Messianic era, at first it will be like that, but then it's going to transform into a miraculous existence. We will be able to do things that are now just science fiction. We'll be able to fly. We'll be able to will things with our imagination. Who will be able to do this? Maybe just the righteous or whoever, I don't know who, I don't know to what extent. It will be a miraculous existence. This is what shall take place. These are the various opinions that exist. What shall happen at that point? So again, according to the Ramban Nachmanides, there will be a resurrection of the dead, and that will be the ultimate spiritual existence of body and soul together. According to the Rambam says, no, the resurrection of the dead will enable man to live in a state of purity, but the ultimate is when the soul will then be released. And then the soul will enjoy the Gan Eden and the world of the souls that God intended. There's a verse, where is it? Chapter 25, verse 29 in the book of Samuel, Shmuel, in which it says that my master, referring to, I believe, King David, my master's soul will be bound up in the bond of eternal life. We say it at sometimes unveilings and things. It will be bound in the bond of eternal life, the soul of King David. But then the verse continues, and your enemies will be, how do you say this? What's the past tense of sling? Slung? They will sling out in the hollow of the sling. Now, what is that? This is talking about the ultimate wicked. The ultimate wicked are those, the very few, but the ultimate wicked, of whom I don't know if they will have any portion in the world to come. What is their fate? Their fate is not Gehenna. Gehenna, this is the cleaners, to cleanse us, remove the stain. But they are in what's called in Hebrew the kaf. This is like the letter chaf, the kaf, hakela. Kela means a sling. You have a sling, it's like a big wide open area. The hollow of the sling. That is the terminology for the eternal, I don't know if eternal, I don't know if love, but that is the terminology for the torment of the ultimate wicked. The ultimate wicked. I'm not talking about us that we do stupid things and I shouldn't have done it, I did. I'm talking about the ultimate wicked. What does that mean? So I saw Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan writes, and he says, it's very interesting. You know, he was a physicist, including, in addition to being a brilliant Talmud Chacham. He writes and he says that the human mind, the brain, the most incredible organ probably in the universe, is only used, scientists say, maybe 10%. 10% of our brain is what's really used. Most of it is not. We don't exercise it, we don't use it, whatever. And he says that he quotes various scientists, not Jewish, who say that the brain is really capable of total recall. There's no reason why we should forget anything. We remember things. Why then don't we recall? Why is it that we have trouble remembering things? He says because the brain has a defense mechanism to prevent overload. These are neurologists, scientists talking, that the brain, there's so much information that's going on and not everybody can organize it properly and maintain it. It could literally be an overload on the circuit. So the brain causes us to forget. It's stored away somewhere in part of the brain. It's there, but we're not cognizant of it. And this enables us to function. After death, Rabbi Kaplan says, we are experiencing like a sudden bombardment of information that's been stored in our brain. Even though, well, wait a minute, the brain is dead. But the soul is, that information is also, it's absorbed by the soul, okay? And the period of adjustment at first, the body, the soul is very, very disturbed by the fact that its body is separate from its existence. And it's also very distressed that it needs, if indeed it's dead, it needs to have its bodies buried. So until the burial, the soul is really very distressed. After the burial, now it can begin to deal with this rush of information and things that it could never imagine that's coming. But slowly, they fall into place. For the extremely wicked, it never falls into place. But it's like sometimes you can dream, or sometimes you have thoughts. It's like images shooting back and forth, and we can't get hold of it. We see something, we don't know what we're seeing. We perceive something, we don't know what it is. That, he says, is the hollow of the sling. There will be all this information and everything, and they will not be able to grasp it and control it and organize it and learn from it. This is Rabbi Kaplan's approach, okay? I'm sharing it with you, but that doesn't mean I understand it. So let's see, what have we spoken about today? We've spoken about the eternity of the soul. We spoke about the Messianic era, when Mashiach comes. How do we know the person will be Mashiach? What shall take place? When Mashiach comes, after the Messianic era, will be resurrection of the dead. When? Rambam says, when God wills. It could be shortly. It could be after 1,000 years, 2,000 years. Whenever God wills, that shall be the resurrection of the dead. And we have these various opinions, the Rambam and the Ramban, as to exactly what is the ultimate goal of man in his existence. Okay, let's take some questions. Go ahead, unmute.
Is it only Jews that are going to be resurrected?
No, not only Jews, but there will be the righteous Gentiles. They have a place in the world to come, and they will be resurrected too. And
Now,
that's
in
a
the
very
case-
excellent point, because as we know in Christianity, if you don't believe, then you ain't going to the party. And in the Islam, same thing. If you're an infidel, then it's eternal damnation. And
Let's say
Judaism says you don't have to believe the way we do. But if you've lived a nice, decent life, you'll have a place too.
in the Shoah, there were kids that were put in different environments and raised as Christians, in order to save them. And some of them grew up never knowing that they were Jewish,
Right?
and then passed away. So would they be resurrected as Jews and all of a sudden find themselves as being a Jew?
Yes, they will. That's exactly right. The truth will be revealed. What's the X-Files statement? The truth? What? What does it say?
X-Files.
Truth will set you free.
Is that what it says? The truth will set you. Is that what it was? Didn't the X-Files have something about the truth? The truth is out there or somewhere. All right, I don't know. Go ahead. Yes, the truth will be. There will be no mysteries, and there will be no confusion at that point.
So, Rabbi, I remember asking you earlier if we know anything about the process that the neshama goes through in order to become purified. What do we know about it?
Well, that process. Okay, that process. The cleansing process. Okay, so we said that the soul, the Gehenna, is really going to the cleaners. How does it work? What are the cleansing agents? That's what you're asking. The cleansing agent is shame. It's shame. We're going to be humiliated and we're going to feel shame. Not that anyone is making us feel the shame, but when the ultimate truth is there and we stand naked, so to say, before God, just our souls, and our life is spread out there for all to see, and when we're asked questions, there are questions we're going to be asked, the Talmud says. If we did this, if we did that. And we'll all have answers, and we're going to have great excuses, and God's going to say, well, wait a second. You say you couldn't do that mitzvah because it was too expensive. Is that right? Yes, I mean, but you went out to eat the night before and you spent 3 times as much. So how does it work? So the the shame, the degree of shame that we feel, that is the cleansing process. Those who don't feel the shame or sufficient shame have not cleansed themselves properly. On Yom Kippur, we daven, and we talk about, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that, and we're supposed to be confessing our sins to God. And if indeed, if we feel I'm humbled by my frailty, by my weakness, by my inability to control my urges and whatever. And if a person really feels that and honestly stands before God and says, I'm worthless. We say it in our davening. We could open this and say, the advantage, the supremacy of man over an animal is nothing. Nothing. An animal doesn't have the intelligence we have. We're worse than an animal. We have an intelligence. We can perceive God. An animal can't. This is what the prophet Isaiah said in Yodashar as Abus Balav. The ox knows its master. And you, my children, don't know me. So they ask a question, say, wait a second, an ox knows its master. It doesn't have an evil inclination. I mean, that's its nature. What are you comparing man to an ox? What do you mean? Man has an evil inclination. That's why, whatever. They say, no, man has an incredible nature too. God placed within our nature, just like we have a hunger to eat, we have a need to sleep, we have a desire and a yearning to connect with our Creator. But we suppress it because we're so interested in all the distractions that life has to offer. That's the human condition. That's who we are. But it's part of our nature, just like an animal. And we have the intelligence to overcome an evil inclination. So the degree of shame that we experience reveals the quality of the human being. And that shame, when you find a verse or something that speaks about the fires of Gehenna, it's not like the world that portrays it with little the devils with pitchforks and the fires and the red. It's referring to the fire that we feel from our own shame. And that shame is what cleanses us. That's the process.
Also, you said that when Mashiach comes, he has to prove that he's Mashiach. He has to be tested and questioned. Do we have people in every generation that are Gedolei Hador, that are capable of doing this?
Yes. And I'll tell you one thing. It ain't us. That I know for sure. Yes. In every generation, we have what's called the Lamed Vavniks, the 36 hidden great righteous people. Sometimes we might know there are people today that like we turn to who are remarkable. And then there are some people that we might not even be aware of. They might be sitting quietly all by themselves doing things that we're completely unaware of. Every generation has 36 of these righteous people. My battery is running low. That's what it says here. Okay? All right, let's go. Another question or two while my battery is on. Anybody?
Okay, so we've had a question many times about the resurrection, that we've said that if souls are being recycled and given multiple lifetimes, then when the resurrection happens, which body are they going to use?
That's a great question. They say also when we are resurrected, we will recognize our loved ones. We'll recognize our parents. Now, what age are we going to come back? I said, we're coming back like when we left. So a person dies at 95, and he's going to recognize his father who died at 75. I mean, what's the story? How is it working over here and everything? And when they are going to be healed and cured, how does that work? I don't have an exact answer. I know that they talk about this. There is, I believe, an opinion that says that everyone will perceive what they perceive in their loved one, meaning that we might see someone at the age of 30, even though when they're resurrected, they might be resurrected at the age they died of 110. But when we see them, they might be 30. We might look to them as 50. Who knows what? I don't know. I'm not certain about this.
Okay, another thing that we talked about was there is a source that talks about the year 6000 and then the year 7000 as being two different parts of the process for the Mashiach, and then perhaps a world to come or something. Can the Rav tell us something about that?
Well, the Midrashim, they do say that, they say, let's see, the Torah begins, Bireishis, Bar Elokim, Es Hashemayim, Ve'es Ha'aretz. There are 7 words in the first verse referring to the 7 days of the week. How many aleph in this verse? Bireishis has 1. Bara has 1, it's 2. Elokim, we got 3. Bereishis bara Elokim, es. Got 4. Hashemayim, none there. The es, that's 5. Ha'aretz, 6. There's 6 aleph in the first verse of the Torah, Genesis. The letter aleph in Hebrew is the same letter, the same word of elef, which means 1,000. And the Medrash tells us that in the very first verse, it's alluding to the fact that this world, as we know it now, can only exist for 6,000 years, which means, not that the planet's going to blow up, it means that the Messianic era will happen within 6,000 years. We know that there are 2 verses in Isaiah. One indicates Mashiach will come anytime, quickly, and one says he'll come at his designated time. So they say that if we are worthy, he can come tomorrow. If we're not, then he'll come at the designated time, which will be by the year 6,000. Now, after the year 6,000, we will have a Messianic era. And they say that from 6,000 to 7,000, as I said, it could be 1,000 years, will be that period of existence. The era of the Messianic era. That's how they explain those 2 periods.
So what happens after the Messianic era according to the Ramban?
We have Tchias HaMesim. According to the Ramban, Messianic era is for those who are alive. Those who are dead are still dead. The Ramban also agrees that those who are dead are in the world of souls. He agrees to that. He learns there's Olam Haba. But the Ramban maintains that Olam Haba is then followed by the Tchias HaMesim, and the Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection, is the ultimate goal. Whereas the Rambam says, when a person dies, there's a world of the souls, they're purified, then there'll be a resurrection, and then there'll be Messianic and a resurrection, and then the soul will be removed from the body, the purified body, and then it will be able to enjoy the Gan Eden and the Olam Haba for all eternity. Okay, everybody. I think I'm done.
Awesome.
I hope this was helpful. I hope we covered something. I mean, it's, as I said, if you're looking for clarification,
Not happening.
it's not happening. But at least we discussed it.
Now next week, the Rav can come back and everyone can ask all their questions like we usually.
I do have a question that we didn't cover. Where does Yosef Mashiach come into all this?
Okay. So let's be aware that here's another thing where some of the nations of the world go crazy. They see the word Mashiach used and they'll start saying, oh, Mashiach, you see Mashiach is here, Mashiach. Mashiach means anointed, appointed and designated for a specific role. We had the Kohen Gadol, the high holy priest, and then there was a Kohen Meshuach, Muhammad. There was a Kohen who was the Mashiach. He was designated and anointed for a specific role for when Klal Yisrael went to war. And then he say he was also like a Kohen Gadol, but not the Kohen Gadol. So the fact that we find King David and others are referred to as Mashiach, Mashiach, doesn't mean that they are the Mashiach that we're talking about. Now, Mashiach ben Yosef, they say there in some of the scriptures, it suggests that from the household and the tribe of Yosef, there will be a designated anointed one who will be engaged in many of the battles that precede the ultimate Messianic era. The ultimate Messianic era is after the war with Gog and Magog. By the way, there's a Targum Yonasan ben Uziel, it's a Medrash, and I got to find it. And he says that this Gog uMagog is going to be Persia. He says
That's
the
cool.
Arabs will make peace. The Bnei Yishmael will make peace with Israel,
Mm-hmm.
the Jews, and there'll be a Messianic era, but the ultimate war is going to be Porus, Persia. And this was written a long time ago. So, just something to keep in mind. All right, everyone.
Go look about tonight.
That's it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, I hope this was helpful in some way.
And then we'll need Mashiach Part B.
Amen.
It's a wonderful class. Thank you.
Oh, now I recognize you.
Now- My wife keeps telling me to put the mask on. What does that mean?
It's upside down.
What does it say?
All right, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All righty. Have a good night, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed. And please make sure you write down all your questions and everything that you can ask Rabbi Slatus next time. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.